a number that almost every Vietnamese person before setting foot in America has calculated in their head. $7.25 an hour. When you're still in Vietnam, that number feels like magic. You multiply it by 8 hours, then by 30 days, you convert it to Vietnamese dong. And the result? It's enormous. It's a small fortune. It's the promise of a future, tuition for your siblings, a new house for your parents. It is the first number of the American dream. But it is also the first lie. Hello, I'm a storyteller. And today we are not talking about math. We are talking about shock. The cultural and emotional shock when a number shatters everything you thought you knew about value. The number $7.25 isn't a wage. It's a historical relic, a figure frozen in amber since 2009. It's a red herring, a political mirage. Because America doesn't have one minimum wage, it has 50. There is the federal wage, the state wage, the city wage, and even the industry wage. A Vietnamese person working at a McDonald's in Los Angeles, California, at $20 an hour is living in a completely different economic universe than a Vietnamese person in a restaurant in Houston, Texas, who, legally, might still be making $7.25. I remember my first paycheck. Holding that check, I felt rich. That feeling lasted exactly until my first trip to the grocery store. I didn't go to an Asian market, I went to an American one, a Whole Foods, where everything was bright and beautiful. I stood in front of the beef counter. I looked at the price of a small steak, and I did the calculation that every immigrant does, the one that ruins all the joy. I converted it back. I realized this single cut of beef cost the same as 3 days of my mother's labor back home. 3 days of her waking up at 4 a.m., setting up her stall, breathing in the street dust for this one piece of meat. And I quietly put it down. I bought a carton of eggs. And I didn't go back to that grocery store for a very long time. The shock isn't how to live on $7.25. The real shock is, why am I making $16 an hour and I still can't breathe? The real debate in America isn't about the minimum wage. It's about the gap, the massive gap between the number the law dictates and the number it actually costs to survive. Economists at MIT have a term for it, the living wage. It's not the number to buy a fancy car or a big house. It is the bare-bones number for a single adult working 40 hours a week to afford housing, food, and medical care without needing government assistance. What is that number? Averaged across the U.S., $25.02. $25. Not for luxury. $25 is the number for basic dignity. It's the number that lets you get sick without going bankrupt. It's the number that lets you sleep without fearing eviction. And that is when the immigrant's math collapses. If the federal minimum wage is $7.25 and the living wage is $25.02, that means the system is designed with a $17.77 deficit every hour. A person working full-time at $7.25 earns $15,080 a year. The federal poverty line for one person is $15,060. The federal minimum wage was not designed for you to live. It was designed, just barely, to keep you from being poor on paper. It is a poverty wage. So, how? If the math is impossible, how are millions of people still surviving? The answer isn't in a spreadsheet.
It is found in the sacrifice. Survival strategy number 1. They sacrifice privacy. Roommates aren't an option. They are a requirement. In Los Angeles or New York, it is normal to be 30, 40, even 50 years old, and still be splitting a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 strangers. It's the sacrifice of space, of never having a truly quiet moment, of having to wait in line for your own bathroom in the morning. We, as Vietnamese people, are used to sacrificing privacy for family. They sacrifice privacy for rent. Survival strategy number 2, they sacrifice time. They don't work one job, they work 2 or 3. They are poly workers. They work 40 hours a week at an office, and another 20 on the weekend driving for Uber or delivering DoorDash. They work 70-hour weeks. 70 hours means you are selling your evenings, your weekends, your dates, your child's first basketball game. 70 hours just to keep afloat. And this is the burden that only immigrants, only we as Asians, understand. A native-born American working 2 jobs is tired, but a Vietnamese immigrant working 2 jobs carries guilt. The guilt of not being successful fast enough. The guilt when their mother calls from Vietnam. She asks, "Are you well? Is work good?" And you lie. You look around your cramped rented room, smelling your roommate's cooking, and you say, "I'm fine, Mom." Work is great. You can't tell her you just skipped dinner because the electric bill was too high. You can't tell her your American dream is actually a shared room and 2 minimum wage jobs just to pay off your debts. That is the immigrant tax. It's not a tax on paper. It is the invisible psychological weight to succeed, to send money home, to prove that your parents' sacrifices were worth it. Sometimes you look at your American colleagues. They work, they go home, they live their lives. They aren't carrying the expectations of an entire extended family. They aren't worried about an invisible debt, half a world away. How can you explain to your family back home that you make $1,000 a month and you are still poor? How can they understand when $1,000 could feed their entire family in Vietnam for months? But there is a third survival strategy, a secret that outsiders rarely see. If the math is income, $1,800, expenses, $2,100, how do they live? They live because of an invisible income. In America, a low wage is the key that unlocks other support. A single mother making $15 an hour likely qualifies for SNAP, food stamps, to buy groceries. Her children qualify for Medicaid, free health insurance. Her real equation is $1,800 wage plus $300 SNAP plus $0 medical costs. Now, the equation suddenly works. This is another massive cultural shock for Asians. In our culture, face, the Dien, is everything. Receiving assistance is synonymous with personal failure. But in America, for millions of workers, it is a standard, legislated, and necessary financial tool for survival. It's the internal conflict. To succeed in the American dream, you must accept what your culture deems a failure. And this leads us to a strange paradox, a cognitive bomb many don't realize. Which state do you think is harder to survive in? California, with $16.50, or Texas, with $7.25? The answer is Texas. Look at the gap. In California, the minimum wage is $16.50. The living wage is about $28.72. The gap is $12.22. In Texas, the minimum wage is $7.25. The cheaper living wage is about $21.82. The gap is $14.57. In other words, being stuck at the bottom in a cheap state like Texas is financially harder than being stuck at the bottom in an expensive state like California, and this directly impacts our Vietnamese community. We constantly hear about the model minority myth, that the median household income for Vietnamese-Americans is around $86,000 a year, higher than the American average. But that number is another lie, a lie of omission. That $86,000 is not one Vietnamese person working as a director, it's a household. In Vietnamese culture, household means 3 generations living under one roof. That $86,000 is 3 or 4 people pooling their income. It's the sound of grandparents coughing in the next room, of parents whispering about bills late at night, of the eldest son working a job after school. That $86,000 is the father working 2 jobs, the mother working 10-hour days at the nail salon. That $86,000 is not a story of wealth. It is a story of tenacity, and there is an even more painful truth hidden inside it. Vietnamese women face one of the largest wage gaps, earning only 56 to 59 cents for every dollar a white man makes. The reason? Because they are hyper-concentrated in low-wage service jobs, like the nail industry, where tips matter more than the base pay. There is a phrase you will hear everywhere in American media: living paycheck to paycheck. Nearly 2/3 of Americans say they live this way, but this is the final bomb. That term is almost meaningless. Because there are 2 definitions being used. When a person making $30,000 a year says they are paycheck to paycheck, it means I have to choose between paying my electric bill and buying gas. A $500 medical bill will make me bankrupt. Their fear is homelessness. This is a survival crisis. But when a survey says 40% of people making $300,000 a year are also paycheck to paycheck, what does that mean? It means after I pay my $4,000 mortgage, my $800 car payment, my $2,000 max 401k contribution, and my $1,500 for my kids' private school, I don't have much cash left. This is a cash flow crisis, or a lifestyle trap. Their fear is having to sell stocks or send their kid to public school. One person is building massive wealth. The other is accumulating debt. For the media to group these 2 pains together is an insult to the person who is truly fighting to survive. So, what is the real shock? After all these years here, I've realized the shock isn't the price of beef. The shock isn't the number $7.25. The shock is realizing your entire value system no longer applies. In Vietnam, we are taught to save, tiet kiem. Our parents hid cash under the mattress. We fear debt. We treat cash as king. In America, the system doesn't reward savers. Inflation eats your cash. It rewards investors. It rewards people who know how to use debt, credit score, intelligently. The fact that you have no debt actually makes it harder for you to rent an apartment. A person with $50,000 in a savings account is considered financially poor compared to a person with $50,000 in a 401k. The shock is realizing the American dream isn't a gift you are handed. When you step off the plane, it is an exchange, a harsh one. You trade your time for dollars. You trade your privacy for a roof. You trade your family dinners for an extra shift. You trade your health for a job with no insurance. And, hardest of all, you trade your peace of mind to carry the expectations of an entire family, half a world away. So, what can you buy? With a minimum wage, you can buy some food, a third of a rented room. You can buy existence, but you cannot buy a life. You cannot buy memories with your children. You cannot buy a night of sleep, free from worry about tomorrow's bills, and perhaps that is the biggest shock of all. When you realize the most expensive thing in America isn't housing or healthcare. The most expensive thing is time and peace. This is a complex topic, and every story is unique. What is your story? Do you remember your first financial shock when you came here? Share it, respectfully, in the comments below. And if these stories resonated with you, please subscribe so we can continue to tell the stories that usually go unspoken.